Welcome back to Reset. Today we are talking about female cycles, and I think we all are aware that it's important to be understanding our cycle, tracking our cycle, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper today and do like a bit of a refresher on what a healthy cycle looks like, what we can do to help regulate our cycle. And I am very excited to have the lovely Grace back in the studio with me to discuss this. Hey, Grace.
Hello. Thank you for having me again. I'm excited to dive into this one too.
Yeah, no, this is going to be great. So for anyone that's meeting Grace for the first time, she is a fertility nutritionist that specializes in all things pregnancy. And we did an episode recently around male fertility. This episode is going to be relevant for people, whether or not they're trying to have a baby, but just looking at their cycles and as a health measure, I guess, in general.
Oh, 100%. It's so important to really tap into your cycle, whether you're actively trying to fall pregnant or actively trying to avoid it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And so let's start from the basics. Why is having a healthy cycle? What is a healthy cycle?
Yeah, so a healthy cycle is going to be a cycle from 24 days to around 35 days. We want ovulation to occur at some point in the middle of that, and we want to be sure that ovulation is occurring. And then we want to have a healthy blood flow that looks like minimal spotting, that looks like red, nice, rich blood with minimal clotting, minimal discomfort, minimal pain. And we want reduced or minimized symptoms around that time as well. So no extreme PMS, no extreme highs and lows throughout the cycle.
If anyone's experiencing those things you said we don't want to be experiencing, what could there be signs and symptoms of?
A hormonal imbalance you're looking at. What hormonal imbalance? You kind of need to dive into what area or what thing you're experiencing, and then be able to understand through that what could be out and where needs the support. It could also be an indication that there is something deeper going on, like a endometriosis, PCOS, thyroid health issues.
Yeah. If someone has gone through their whole life not really thinking too much about their cycle, not tracking, not really noticing any trends, where's the best place to start?
Yeah, the best place to start is by tracking your cycle. And there's many different methods to do that. I guess whether you are actively trying to conceive or actively not, using something like your cervical mucus, which we can chat around, and your basal body temperature to better understand your cycles is the best way to start. That way you can really dive into where you're sitting, your cycle length, you start to note down any symptoms that you're experiencing and when you're experiencing them, and you notice around what your blood flow and quality looks like. That gives you a really good starting point to understand, okay, where in this, what kind of thing do we need to be able to shift to better support what we're looking for?
Basal body temperature measurement, what is that?
Yeah, so essentially it's your basal temperature. So it's something that you measure every morning before you get up. You have a pre-ovulatory temperature, and then once you have ovulated, your temperature will increase just by, a couple of point degrees really. So it's a very minor shift, but that is your confirmation that ovulation has happened. And it's the second part of the cycle where progesterone is going to be that dominant hormone.
And this might be a silly question, but how are we measuring this?
Yeah, so you can measure it just through a basal body temperature thermometer. You can just get any one at a pharmacy, and you literally just pop it under your tongue, and you take and record the temperature. There's lots of different apps that you can do that on, and you just track it every morning. There are alternatives where they're still measuring your temperature. It's just the method of doing it. You could get like an armband, or you could have a ring to measure your temperature. They're the most reliable. Something like your Apple Watch is not going to be super reliable.
Okay. So something like a Oura ring or something?
Yeah, an Oura ring, temp drop, which is the armband.
Okay. And we often hear about these 4 phases of a cycle. Can you just give us a bit of an overview of what each phase is?
Yeah, 100%. So you are going to start with menstruation. So that is your period. We start day 1 is your first day of fresh red blood. So if you have spotting before, that is from the old cycle. So when you see that fresh red blood, that is your day 1. You'll go through your period, your menstrual phase, which typically lasts around 4 to 7 days for most people. And then you'll be in your follicular phase, and that is really the build up to ovulation. In your follicular phase, you have estrogen being the dominant hormone. Estrogen grows things, so it grows that endometrial lining. It does a final maturation phase of the egg. It makes us feel really good. It makes us energetically be a lot more outward. We tend to be more confident. Our face structure changes as well, so we become a little bit more attractive in this time. We function better, we perform better. So if you have a work presentation, if you're performing at a gym or something else, this is your best time, this is your best performance time. And it's all leading up to the ovulation point. Basically, when you have a dominant follicle ready to be ovulated, estrogen will tell the rest of your body, your brain, all right, we've got a dominant follicle, let's release it, and this is ovulation. Ovulation happens, which is really just for 24 hours. So your egg is released and it has 24 hours to fertilize and hopefully go into conception if that's what you're looking for. And then you enter into the luteal phase of your cycle. The luteal phase is really that last phase before menstruation again. In your luteal phase, we have progesterone being the dominant hormone. This is released after ovulation. This has a very calming effect on us. So typically we go more inward, we start to relax a little bit more, has a very calming effect on us. At the end of that cycle, it's either going to be pregnancy or you're going to get your period. There's no other alternative. And then you restart that cycle, the next cycle.
Okay. And you said it's really important for us to be understanding our cycles, whether we are trying to fall pregnant or not. For someone who's not trying to fall pregnant and is actively trying to avoid it, what do they need to know about their cycle? And is there certain times of the month that they should avoid activity?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So they do need to pay close attention to their cycle, regardless, but obviously for kind of different reasons. But they need to know when they're ovulating, which your BBT will confirm that ovulation has happened, but not predict it. So you've got to be careful because you can fall pregnant in your fertility window is the 5 days before ovulation and the day of ovulation. So this is why we use things like cervical mucus and tracking over time to understand what your cycle looks like at an individual level. Because then obviously if someone is aware of when they typically ovulate within the cycle, especially if they have a very regular cycle, every month it's 28 days, it's 30, it's 31, but it's very regular for them. And they then through that can predict when the ovulation is, the time before that. And then they use their cervical mucus to better guide that window as well. And then obviously it's not either taking additional method of protection to prevent pregnancy happening within that 5 days before and the day of.
Yeah, interesting. And if someone's noticed that they've stopped getting their period and they're not pregnant, what are some of the things that could be causing that?
Yeah. So if someone was getting their period before and now they've stopped, want to look at, is it potentially PCOS? Is it something going on with your thyroid where there's a break in the connection of what's happening to support ovulation actually occurring? Or potentially, are they going through a time of elevated stress? And the body can understand stress to be different than the mind. So potentially under eating, over exercising could be a form of stress that a person doesn't perceive as stressful, but their body does, and their body will shut down ovulation through it. So humans are the only mammal that can turn off their reproductive system. And if your body is feeling like it's running away from a tiger, it will just turn it off. But what the body understands to be running away from the tiger and what the brain understands is very, very different.
Our bodies are so intelligent, aren't they?
They are. And it is obviously a protective mechanism, right? Like if you were to run away from a tiger, that wouldn't be the time to have a baby.
Correct. Are there some lifestyle factors, and I guess which lifestyle includes food, exercise, how we spend our time? Are there some things that you think all women should be paying more attention to?
Yeah, 100%. So I guess to begin with, if there is a deeper issue going on with cycle health, such as endometriosis, PCOS, or anything with the thyroid, then this is where it can require that extra level of personalization just to make sure that those factors are being managed and addressed properly. If we're talking about just general cycle health and just supporting our healthy hormones, it's one, making sure that you're adequately fueling yourself. So making sure that we are having enough proteins and fats within your diet, and carbohydrates as well. So all of those play an incredible but really important role on your cycle health. If you do not eat enough proteins and fats, you're not going to have the ability to make the hormones. If you're under eating carbohydrates, your body's going to understand that to be stress. And that's when ovulation can shut down. So we do need to make sure that we're getting our micronutrient needs in there. We need to make sure that we're eating within the morning so that we're supporting our blood sugar, we're supporting hormone health, but we're also telling our body it's safe. We're not in a restrictive space at the moment. We're feeling safe. So that's nutrition. Adequately exercising, so not under or over exercising. And that limit is going to be dependent on the person. But I guess what you're looking at within that is if you have a very healthy cycle, if you're fueling yourself, but you are exercising to a good, like a higher level, potentially your benchmark is higher than someone else's. So you need to look at your cycle and the relationship you have with food and exercise to really determine that. Really looking at the nervous system again. I think so many of us, like myself included, just run on high functioning anxiety, and we're productive, right? Like we're busy being productive, but it does have a knock-on effect onto hormone and cycle health too. And obviously making sure that we're getting adequate sleep, which is more than what males need.
If someone is aware that their cycle is not quite as they would want it to be and is thinking about starting to make some of these nutrition and lifestyle changes, how long does it take before we start to see results?
It depends what shift is out, to be honest. I like to see changes being made and then you can see the impact of them within a couple of months. For other people, that journey might be longer, especially if they have lost their cycle and need to regain it. It can take longer than that for the body to feel safe enough to regain their cycle. But for anyone else who is potentially looking at very painful periods, potentially they're looking at spotting within their cycle, or just occasionally missing ovulation, their journey could look shorter. So within a couple of months, I like to see something, and usually like to see something completely resolve within, a 6-month period, say.
Okay. And if you go through, say, a really traumatic or stressful month, does that show up in your cycle the following month, or does it take time to process with our bodies?
Both.
Okay.
Both, yeah. So potentially it could potentially be that cycle or the following cycle, especially if we're looking at that ovulation shutting down or spotting where there could be progesterone levels, but it also can come in the months prior. So if you've gone through a stressful time, your hormones have been impacted through that, then the egg that has been developing, it takes around 100 days for the egg to mature before ovulation. So if in that 100 days you've been exposed to higher levels of stress, other factors that then impact the quality of that egg, you're not going to see the true impact of that until months later.
So if someone's looking to start actively trying to have a baby in the future, how far in advance do you usually recommend that they start sort of looking at their cycle and trying to optimize things?
As early as possible, because if there is something deeper going on within their cycle, say they're having very varying lengths of cycles. So, sometimes it's 26 days, sometimes it's 30, sometimes it's 35. You really want to understand why that's happening. If someone's very symptomatic, you want to understand why that's happening. And the longer you have run up in that journey, the better. But as early as possible, the more that you understand where you are within your cycle, the more that you can know each month is even very consistent and reliable and you can predict it, the better ability that you have to maximize your time from when you start trying to conceive.
And what about contraception? If someone's taking the pill, or maybe they have Mirena, or there's a whole host of different things they could be on, how far in advance before having a baby should they come off these things? Like, how long does it take our bodies to kind of work out what our natural rhythm is again?
Yeah, it can take a good few months. So again, depending on what contraception you were on prior, but it can take a while for the body to kind of get back into that ovulation phase and for that to be predictable and reliable. And then some forms of contraception can lower the levels of micronutrients that you have in your body. It can deplete nutrients. And so if you're then looking to conceive, you want to make sure that going into conception, you have long enough to rebuild all of those nutrients up. So I like to say like a 3 to 6 month window is the best. I guess it also depends on why you went onto contraception in the first place, whether it was just to prevent pregnancy or because it was being given as a Band-Aid solution essentially because of something else was going on in your cycle. So if you went to the doctor and the conversation was very much around like reducing symptoms, your cycles were irregular, these things, you going onto the contraceptive pill is only just kind of put a Band-Aid on that. So you kind of need to take off the Band-Aid and then reassess where your cycle's at, because potentially what you were seeing before was your body trying to tell you something. And we need to know that to be able to better support that fertility journey itself.
And now zooming out a little bit and looking at sort of the first time we get our period and the last time we get our period, I keep hearing that it's becoming younger and younger for women. Is that true? And if yes, do we know why?
Yeah, it is true that it is becoming younger and younger. One of the potential reasons is our exposure to environmental toxins and how exposed we are from day dot with environmental toxins and just they mimic your sex hormones. So it's driving that to occur earlier.
Is there anything we can do as if we've got daughters or we're around young females to help minimize those? Like, what are some of the common things that we might be able to make changes with?
Yeah, I guess it's depending on when you're starting. If you are on your conception journey or you're already pregnant, especially if you have a daughter, their reproductive health will be partly dependent by your exposure to environmental toxins while they're in utero, so through that pregnancy. And then it's through their life, reducing things like chemical exposure, which could be through personal products, it could be through baby care products, it could be using filtered water, so many different ways that they can kind of minimize it. Yeah, it's a big question, that one.
Huge question and a lot of pressure and responsibility. What's the average age at the moment that girls will start to get their period?
Kind of changes depending on country to country. It's typically around the 11 to 13.
Okay. And then looking forward into the future, when does sort of perimenopause, menopause, what are the age ranges of those at the moment?
So it largely varies from late 30s to mid 50s.
Okay.
You're really looking at, because menopause is a retrospective diagnosis, so you go through menopause to say, I've gone through menopause. The perimenopausal state can last for years. Your best indication is to look at when your mum went through it or when other kind of female family members went through it as well, to understand if you might be earlier or later on within that journey.
Okay. I feel like that's a whole episode in
That is a whole episode. Yeah, for sure.
And are there some supplements or things that we should all be thinking about taking if we want to optimize our cycle? Or is that, again, just case by case basis?
It's very case by case. It's very case by case. A lot of supplements and herbal formulas that are regulating your cycle can have the opposite effect for some people. So we do want to, that is something that I would definitely say needs personalized advice over.
Okay. Is there anything we haven't discussed today that you wish more women knew?
I guess one thing is potentially just changing the narrative that your cycle is this annoying thing that you have to put up with. There's a lot of power that you can gain by really leaning into the different cycle phases and what they mean. And, you know, I think within society, there's this expectation that you're going to show up the same every single day. And the fact that we don't and we can't and we shouldn't is not a bad thing. It's actually allowing ourselves to lean into the fact that, you know what, I'm going to go through these seasons within my cycle, and it's actually a really positive thing, and there's actually a lot of power that can be gained from it. I think part of the issue is that we're told to kind of go against that. We're switching that narrative, leaning into it, and really understanding this is happening to me and it's a really positive thing, I think is probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's a beautiful reframe. Grace, thank you so much. That's a really nice summary and hopefully leaves everyone with a little bit of homework to go and reflect. And if we're not already tracking our cycles, then probably something we should be doing and just understand what is normal for us. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.